Auven.
On December 20th, 1968, David Faraday gets dressed inside his family home in Vallejo, California. He puts on a light blue shirt, brown corduroy pants, and brown suede shoes. Then he walks out into the cold evening air. He is going on his first date with Betty Lou Jensen. She thinks they are going to a school Christmas concert. They will never come home. This is the story of the hunt for the Zodiac killer, the man who turned 5 confirmed murders into one of America's strangest unsolved puzzles. At 7:30 p.m., David leaves his parents' house. He gets into a brown and beige Rambler station wagon registered to his mother. He drives across Vallejo and reaches Betty Lou's house at 8 p.m. She is ready. She wears a violet mini dress with white cuffs and a white collar. David helps her into a white fur jacket.
Thank you, darling.
They leave at
No,
about
thank
8:20.
you.
Betty Lou has promised to be home by 11. Instead, David drives east. The place they choose is Lake Herman Road, a quiet stretch outside town often used by young couples. It is isolated enough to feel private, but close enough that cars still pass. That detail will matter. At around 11 p.m., a married couple drives past in a gold Pontiac. They see David's Rambler. David is in the driver's seat. Betty Lou sits close beside him. Nothing appears wrong. Around 11:10, another driver passes. He notices the Rambler again. He also notices another vehicle near it, but not well enough to identify it. The two cars are now side by side on an empty country road. Then a man gets out. According to the reconstruction in the source material, he does not immediately use the open passenger window. He first moves to the rear of the Rambler. He fires into the back window. Then he moves to the left side and fires near the rear wheel well. It looks like a method, not a panic. He is trying to force them out. It works. Betty Lou flees from the car. David tries to follow her through the passenger side. The man moves back to the open window and fires at close range. David falls inside the vehicle. Betty Lou runs north toward Vallejo. The man follows. He fires 5 times. By the time the next car comes down Lake Herman Road, the attack is over. 2 teenagers are dead. There is no obvious motive, no robbery, no fight, no known enemy waiting in the dark. Just 2 bodies, shell casings, and a country road that suddenly becomes famous for the wrong reason. At first, nobody knows this is the beginning of anything. Police investigate. Families mourn. Vallejo is shaken. But the case does not yet have a name. There is no symbol, no letters, no costume, no cryptogram. There is only a double murder on a cold night before Christmas. For about 6 months, the case sits in that shape. Then, on July 4th, 1969, Vallejo celebrates Independence Day. Fireworks explode over the Bay Area. People are outside. Restaurants are busy. Roads fill, empty, and fill again. Darlene Farron is working at Terry's restaurant on Magazine Street in Vallejo. According to people who knew her, she was friendly, social, and easy to approach. The source material includes accounts that she had seemed nervous before the attack, and that people around her remembered strange attention from men she knew or may have known. These claims are part of the history of the case, but they are not proof of who killed her. That is one of the problems with Zodiac. Almost every fact casts a shadow. That night, Darlene drives a bronze Chevrolet Corvair. She picks up Michael Mageau near his house. Mike gets into the car in a rush. According to the source material, he does not turn off the lights or the television in the house. Even the door is left open. The Corvair pulls away. A light-colored car follows. Mike notices it first. Darlene tries to lose the vehicle by taking smaller streets. It stays behind them. Mike later believes it may have been an older Falcon with old California plates. The details are not perfect. They rarely are, but the pattern is clear enough. They are being followed. Darlene turns into the Blue Rock Springs parking area, near a golf course about 7 kilometers from central Vallejo. Like Lake Herman Road, it is a place young couples use because it is quiet. She pulls in, hits a wooden block, and the engine stalls. The other car comes in behind them. Then it leaves. For a moment, It looks like nothing will happen. Then it returns. A man gets out and walks toward the Corvair. He carries a flashlight. The light shines into the car. Darlene and Mike think it may be a police officer. It is not. The first shots come through the car. Darlene is hit. Mike is hit. The man begins to walk away, then hears movement from inside the vehicle. He returns and fires again. This time, someone survives. Michael Mageau lives long enough to describe the attack. That survival becomes one of the most important breaks in the case. It gives investigators a living witness. It also gives them something worse. A connection.
Shortly after
the attack, a man calls Vallejo police from a payphone. He reports a double murder. He gives the location. Then he claims responsibility for Blue Rock Springs and for the killings on Lake Herman Road. The caller knows there are two crime scenes. The police now know they may have one killer. On July 31st, 1969, 3 newspapers receive letters: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter contains a third of a cipher. The writer claims to be the killer. He gives details about the Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs attacks that had not all been released to the public. He demands that the newspapers print the cipher. If they do not, he threatens to kill again. This is where the murders become something else: a media machine. The letters are signed with a symbol, a circle crossed by lines. It looks like a gun sight. It also looks like a mark someone wants you to remember. At first, Vallejo Police Chief Jack Stilts is not fully convinced. He asks the writer to send more proof. The writer answers with another letter. This one gives more details. It also gives him a name. For the first time, he calls himself Zodiac. It is hard to overstate how strange this was in 1969. Killers had written to newspapers before. Jack the Ripper had done it in London. But in the modern American press, this was different. Zodiac was not hiding from publicity. Publicity was part of the weapon. The murders were terrifying. The letters made them contagious. The cipher was built from symbols: Greek-looking signs, weather signs, alphabet letters, naval-looking marks, astrological shapes. According to the source material, each third had 8 rows of 17 symbols. It was not a simple one-to-one substitution. The killer used multiple symbols for common letters, making frequency analysis harder. This was not genius-level cryptography, but it was good enough to turn murder into homework. Law enforcement agencies looked at it. Experts examined it. The public stared at it in the newspapers. Then a school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty solved it. The solved message did not reveal the killer's name. It revealed the performance. The writer claimed he liked killing because it was more fun than killing wild game. He claimed his victims would become slaves for him in the afterlife. The final 18 letters remained unresolved. So the first cipher gave the public an answer and took it away in the same movement. It proved the writer wanted to be read. It did not prove who he was. 2 months later, Zodiac changes the pattern. On September 27, 1969, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard drive to Lake Berryessa. Brian parks his black Volkswagen Karmann Ghia near the water at around 4 p.m. They walk several hundred feet to a quiet place near 2 large oak trees. The shoreline is empty. Brush makes the spot even more private. They sit on a blanket. For about an hour, nothing happens. Then Cecilia notices someone. A man is nearby. He has approached through terrain that partly hides him from view. He is not dressed like the man from Blue Rock Springs. He is not pretending to be police. He is wearing a black hood. The hood has straight edges and hangs down over his body. It looks almost handmade. On the front is the crossed circle symbol, the same symbol from the letters. He wears clip-on sunglasses over the eye openings. For the first and only confirmed time, the Zodiac appears as a character he invented. He tells Brian and Cecilia he has escaped from prison. He says he needs money and a car. The story is false, but it gives him control. Brian tries to cooperate. The man has a gun. He also has a knife. He makes Cecilia tie Brian up. Then he ties Cecilia. The next part is not shown here in detail. It does not need to be. Both are stabbed. The man walks back to Brian's car. On the door, he writes a message. He lists the dates of the previous attacks: Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, Lake Berryessa. He adds the time and the word knife. Then he calls the police. This time, the call comes from Napa. The operator hears a calm voice. The caller reports a double murder, though one victim is still alive. He gives the location. Then he hangs up. Investigators later find the phone off the hook. Brian Hartnell survives. Cecilia Shepard does not. Now the case is different again. At Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs, the killer used a gun. At Lake Berryessa, he uses a costume, rope, a false prison story, a knife, a car door confession, and another phone call. He is changing his method, but keeping the brand. That makes him unpredictable. It also makes him highly recognizable. Most serial killers try not to be recognized. Zodiac designs a logo. 2 weeks later, the killer moves from Lover's Lanes to San Francisco. On October 11, 1969, Paul Stine is driving a taxi in the city. He had studied at San Francisco State College and drove at night to support himself. That evening, he picks up a passenger near the theater district. The passenger sits in the back and gives a destination in Presidio Heights, Washington and Maple. Stine writes it into his trip log and starts the meter. A few minutes later, the passenger changes the destination. He tells Stine to drive one block farther. The taxi stops near Washington and Cherry, in front of 3898 Washington Street. Across the street, children at a house party look out the window. A 14-year-old girl sees the taxi. She calls her brothers over. They have a clear view. The cab is about 15 meters away. They see a stocky man inside. They see him doing something to the driver. Then Paul Stine is shot. The killer does not immediately flee. He wipes parts of the cab. He takes a piece of Stine's shirt. The witnesses call police. They describe a man leaving the scene. This should have been the best chance to catch him. Instead, it becomes one of the most debated mistakes in the case. A radio broadcast goes out with the wrong description. Officers Donald Fook and Eric Zelms are nearby. They are looking for a black male suspect. At Jackson and Cherry, they see a stocky white man walking in the fog toward the Presidio. According to the source material, they ask him whether he has seen anything unusual. He points them in another direction. They drive on. If that man was Zodiac, 2 armed officers spoke to him moments after a murder and let him walk away. 3 days later, the Chronicle receives another letter. Inside is a piece of Paul Stine's bloody shirt. Now there is no serious question that the taxi murder is connected. Zodiac has physically carried part of the victim into the newspaper system. The letter also includes a threat. He says he may attack a school bus. The Bay Area reacts. This is where Zodiac's confirmed body count and his social impact become two different things. The confirmed number is 5 dead, 2 wounded, across 4 attacks. Compared to other American serial killers, that number is lower than the legend suggests. Zodiac himself claimed 37. Authorities did not confirm that. But numbers are only one part of fear. A killer who threatens school children does not need to kill school children to reshape a city. Police and school systems take precautions. Drivers are told not to stop if a tire goes flat. Children are told to get down. Buses are watched by officers. In Napa County, armed units ride on school buses. Patrol cars and even aircraft monitor routes. Around Northern California, parents, teachers, officers, and children are forced to behave as if the threat could be real. Zodiac has discovered something powerful. A murder can terrorize a family. A letter can terrorize everyone else. By November 1969, the letters keep coming. Armstrong and Toshke, the San Francisco investigators, are informed that the Chronicle has received more Zodiac correspondence. One card contains a new cipher. This one has 340 characters. It becomes known as Z340.
The first
cipher had been solved in days. This one resists for 51 years. It sits in books, newspapers, documentaries, and internet forums. It becomes a kind of museum object. People stare at it for decades, looking for a name that is not there. Then, in 2020, a private team finally cracks it. The FBI confirms it is aware the cipher has been solved by private citizens and says the case remains an ongoing investigation. The message is strange, but not because it reveals everything. It says the writer was not afraid of the gas chamber. It refers to a television show. It mocks the people trying to catch him. Again, it does not name him. That is the pattern. Every time Zodiac seems to offer a solution, he offers another room. The 340 cipher mattered because it proved the code was not just random noise. It was a real message, but it also exposed the central cruelty of the case. 51 years of effort could solve the puzzle and still not solve the man. What kind of killer does this? The source material gives several possible frames. He may have been a man who understood newspapers. He may have been interested in codes. He may have copied ideas from publicly available books about cryptography. He may have wanted to look more mysterious than he was. He may have used the name Zodiac because of symbol alphabets, or because the crossed circle looked like a signature he could own. But those are theories.
The confirmed record
is narrower. He killed at Lake Herman Road. He attacked at Blue Rock Springs. He attacked at Lake Berryessa. He murdered Paul Stein in San Francisco. He sent letters. He used ciphers. He threatened buses. He claimed more murders than authorities could prove. Then, after several years of intermittent communication, he effectively vanished. That vanishing is part of why the case survived. Most manhunts have a capture, a confession, a trial, a cell, a grave. Zodiac has none of those things. Instead, he has suspects. More than 2,500 people were reportedly checked over the years. Neighbors, ex-husbands, co-workers, odd men who fit a sketch, men who owned similar cars, men who liked codes, men whose relatives called police because something about them felt wrong. One name rose above the others: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen lived in Vallejo. He became the most famous suspect in the case, and, according to some accounts, the only suspect publicly named by police. The case against him was never clean. It had suggestive details, but not proof. A man named Don Cheney reportedly told investigators that Allen had once spoken about hunting people, attacking couples in Lover's Lane areas, using a flashlight attached to a gun, sending letters to police, signing them Zodiac, and attacking a school bus. If true, that is an alarming story. But an alarming story is not a conviction. Investigators looked at Allen repeatedly. Search warrants were served over the years. Some details seemed to pull him toward the case. He had owned a Zodiac Seawolf wristwatch. His shoe size was reportedly similar to evidence discussed in the case. Some writing features seemed, to some observers, worth looking at. His typewriter was reported in the source material as the same model as one connected to Zodiac correspondence. But the evidence also pushed away. DNA and fingerprints from crime scenes and letters did not match Allen, according to sources summarized in the document. A handwriting expert ruled him out. A bloody handprint from Paul Stein's cab did not match him. Allen was never charged. He died in 1992. That is where responsible storytelling has to stop. Arthur Lee Allen was a suspect. He was not proven to be Zodiac. The difference matters.
In a case
like this, suspicion spreads easily. It spreads because the killer left a shape, but not a face. The sketch from Presidio Heights gives a general image. The survivor descriptions give fragments. The letters give voice. The ciphers give personality. But none of it creates a person you can put in a courtroom and prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So the case becomes a machine for generating suspects. Some are serious, some are weak, some are absurd. Some come from relatives, some come from amateur sleuths. Some come from people who see codes everywhere. The casebreakers later claim Gary Francis Post was Zodiac. Police and other observers do not accept that as proven. Other theories attempt to link Zodiac to different unsolved murders, including the Cherry Joe Bates case in Riverside. Some handwriting and law enforcement discussions have explored possible connections, but the source material shows those links remain disputed. That is the second machine Zodiac built. Not just fear, obsession. Robert Graysmith, the Chronicle cartoonist who later became one of the most famous civilian figures in the story, described the case as obsession. The source material notes broken marriages, damaged careers, and people harmed by years of fixation. That may sound dramatic until you look at the structure of the case. Zodiac is perfectly engineered to trap attention. There are real victims, real letters, real codes, real police errors, real surviving witnesses, real physical evidence, real public threats, real suspects who look almost convincing until they do not. And at the center, a missing name. The missing name acts like gravity. Everyone falls toward it. The press played a central role from the beginning. Zodiac understood that newspapers were not just reporting the story, they were part of the story. The Chronicle was one of Northern California's major papers. The Examiner and the Times-Herald were also pulled in. By splitting the first cipher across 3 newspapers, Zodiac forced multiple institutions to decide what to print. He created competition, panic, and civic responsibility in one move. If the papers printed him, they amplified him. If they did not, he threatened to kill. There was no clean choice. This is why the case feels modern, even though it belongs to the late 1960s. Zodiac understood attention as leverage. He understood identity as a brand. He understood that a symbol can travel faster than a face. He understood that if he made the public part of the puzzle, the public would never fully let go. That is the weirdest part. He was not just avoiding capture. He was recruiting witnesses after the fact. Every reader became involved. Every parent reading the bus threats became involved. Every amateur code breaker became involved. Every person who thought their uncle, teacher, neighbor, or father looked like the sketch became involved. The manhunt escaped the police department. It entered the culture. And still, on the ground, the evidence remained frustratingly physical. Shell casings, a taxi, a shirt piece, handwriting, latent prints, survivor memory, phone booths, tire tracks and car descriptions that were never quite enough. The first attack happened on an isolated road, the second in a parked car, the third at a lake, the fourth in a dense city neighborhood with witnesses watching from across the street. Each scene should have created more clarity. Instead, each created a new complication. Lake Herman Road gave no surviving witness. Blue Rock Springs gave Michael Mageau. But in the chaos of pain, darkness, and sudden light, Lake Berryessa gave Brian Hartnell, who survived a direct encounter, but the killer wore a hood. Presidio Heights gave child witnesses, police nearby, and possibly a face-to-face encounter with officers, but the radio description was wrong. Every break came with a trapdoor. The letters were the same. They proved authorship, or appeared to. They gave details withheld from the public. They included Stein's shirt. They gave police and press something to analyze. But they also created false leads. They could be copied. They could be imitated. They could be forged. By 1978, questions about authenticity and copied handwriting became part of the case itself. The more Zodiac wrote, the harder it became to know which Zodiac was real. There was also the strange television episode. A man calling himself Sam contacted attorney Melvin Belli and claimed he needed help. The source material says that later calls helped trace this person to a patient at Napa State Hospital, not the Zodiac. But at the time, it added another layer of public theater. The case had become a stage. Some people were victims, Some were investigators, some were hoaxers, some were obsessives, some were reporters, some were terrified parents, some were just citizens calling in tips because the man in the sketch looked like someone they knew. The actual killer could have been among them, or not. That is the problem.
Forensic technology
changed over the decades.
DNA
analysis improved.
Genealogy
helped solve old cases, including the Golden State Killer. Vallejo officials expressed hope that evidence could eventually produce a hit. But Zodiac is not the Golden State Killer. The evidence is older. The chain of custody is complicated. The letters were handled, mailed, processed, stored, and re-examined over generations. The future may still produce a name, but it has not produced a confirmed one yet. That leaves two versions of the Zodiac case. One is small and specific. 5 confirmed dead. David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, Paul Stein. 2 confirmed survivors. Michael Mageau, Brian Hartnell. 4 confirmed attacks. Northern California, 1968 and 1969. The other version is enormous. Dozens of claimed victims, unsolved ciphers, school bus threats, possible copycats, false confessions, amateur theories, police mistakes, newspaper mythology, a movie, books, forums, podcasts, new suspects every few years, a killer who became more famous for not being caught than many killers became for being caught. The first version is a murder case. The second is a cultural virus. And the second version often threatens to swallow the first. That is why the victims matter at every stage. David was not a symbol. Betty Lou was not a clue. Darlene was not just a possible connection to a suspect. Cecilia was not just the woman at the lake. Paul Stein was not just the shirt piece in an envelope. They were people who happened to cross paths with a man who wanted the world to stare at him. And the world did. Zodiac's confirmed murders ended in 1969. His letters continued afterward. The most accepted communications run into the early 1970s, with later disputed letters. Then the voice fades. Not with an arrest, not with a confession, not with a body. Just absence. That absence created the legend. Maybe he died. Maybe he was imprisoned for something else. Maybe he stopped because the attention was enough. Maybe he feared that continuing would expose him. Maybe he was never as organized as the letters made him seem. Maybe the costume, the ciphers, and the threats were not proof of genius, but proof of someone improvising a myth around ordinary violence. That possibility is important. Zodiac may not have been America's smartest killer. He may have been one of America's best packaged killers. A man can look like a mastermind if the public only sees the parts he chooses to mail. The crimes themselves show planning, but not perfection. Witnesses lived. Police came close. The letters gave away behavioral patterns. The Stein shirt proved connection, but also required physical risk. The Lake Berryessa costume was memorable, but it did not hide his build, voice, or behavior from Brian. The Presidio escape may have depended less on brilliance than on a radio error and fog. The myth is clean. The case is messy. That mess is why he was not caught. There was no single police department with all the pieces at first. Vallejo, Napa County, San Francisco, Solano County, state agencies, federal agencies, newspapers, and private citizens all held parts of the puzzle. Communication was slower. Forensic tools were weaker. Databases were limited. Tips came in by the hundreds and thousands. Every letter created new urgency and new noise. Noise is useful to a killer. The more people search, the more people can search in the wrong direction. The hunt for Zodiac was never just a hunt for a man. It was a hunt through symbols, reports, partial descriptions, dead ends, hoaxes, and the psychology of a public that wanted the answer almost as badly as the killer wanted attention. That is why the case still works on us. It gives just enough. A logo, a hood, a cipher, a phone call, a taxi, a bloody shirt, A suspect who almost fits. A second suspect who does not. A solved cipher that solves nothing. A police encounter that may have been the moment. It is not an empty mystery.
It is worse.
It is worse.
It is a mystery.
It is a mystery full of evidence.
On paper,
the Zodiac killer should feel old. The cars are old. The payphones are old. The newspapers are old. The letters are old. The witnesses are aging or gone. The investigators are retired or dead. The world that made him famous no longer exists. But the structure is current. A violent act, a symbol, a message, a demand for attention, a public force to interpret it, a swarm of amateur investigators, a suspect named online, a debate that never stops, a person becoming a brand through fear. Zodiac did not have the internet. He behaved like he was waiting for it. That may be the reason he remains one of America's strangest killers. Not because of the number of murders, not because the codes were impossible, not because the costume was elaborate, but because he understood that being unknown could become more powerful than being known. A captured killer becomes a defendant. An uncaptured killer becomes a mirror. People see what they want in him. A criminal genius, a pathetic attention seeker, a failed suspect, a hidden neighbor, a code maker, a hoaxer, a monster, a man who got lucky. The case can support all of those feelings because the center is blank, and blank spaces invite writing. The safest conclusion is the least satisfying one. Authorities have confirmed 5 murders and 2 survivors. The killer claimed more. Those claims are not confirmed. Arthur Lee Allen was investigated and publicly associated with the case, but he was never charged and evidence did not prove he was Zodiac. Later suspects have been proposed, but none have been officially confirmed as the killer. The 340 cipher was solved, but it did not identify him. The FBI still has case files in its vault, and after the 340 solution, the case was described as ongoing. So the hunt is not really over. It has only changed form. It began with officers on rural roads and city streets. Then it moved into newspaper rooms, then into code-breaking tables, then into evidence lockers, then into message boards and documentaries, and cold case DNA hopes. Each generation inherits the same question and a slightly different set of tools. The question is simple. Who was he? The answer may already exist in a file, a fingerprint, an envelope, a forgotten interview, or a family story that nobody has connected properly. It may be buried in evidence that can no longer speak. It may belong to a dead man whose name has been said before. It may belong to someone still outside the main suspect list. Or it may never arrive. On December 20th, 1968, David Faraday stepped into the cold air and drove toward Betty Lou Jensen's house. At that moment, there was no Zodiac, no symbol, no cipher, no legend. Just a boy, a car, and a first date. Everything after that was built by a man who wanted to be seen, but never found. And more than 50 years later, the strangest part is still the same. Was he hiding from us, or inside the hunt?